Hello, and welcome to Horror Rewind. This is Kelly Florence.
And this is Mark Florence.
And today we're talking about The Babysitter. Guess what? We know we are late to the party. And the reason is, I was afraid about the male gaze in this one, Mark. And maybe that makes me basic, or maybe it makes me like too quote unquote academic, but I was like, oh no, are they just going to make Samara Weaving like too cute and sexy and attractive, and we're not going to get to know real characters? But guess what? Spoiler alert, I freaking love this movie, and Samara Weaving is a treasure.
100% agree. Yeah, it didn't go down the road you're talking about. I really enjoyed like not the theme of the movie, but like the tone of the movie. Like, it was pretty comedic, but it was still like horror at the same time, and it was still scary and suspenseful, but it was funny. So I enjoyed the fine film.
This is what I'm telling you. There are very few comedy horror movies that deliver. And you know what? At me with more that do deliver. This is what I'm saying. The Burbs, which I know, Mark, is one of your favorite. Fright Night 2011 is one. Shaun of the Dead is another. Like, there are comedic horror films, and I mean, I apparently like Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness actually both hit that note. And Ash versus Evil Dead, the TV series, obvi. But, like, this is what I love. Like, give me more.
Yeah, now that you're naming all these off, I realize this is probably my favorite genre of horror movie, like the comedic horror movie. It just, I don't know. I just like, it's fun to watch. You laugh. You're scared. You're scared, or you're concerned about what's happening. Yeah, a lot of gross out stuff, and still funny. So yeah, I mean, I don't like just like a true horror movie probably as much. I like this tone.
It's so good. So obviously we are going to get into some spoilers here, and P.S. we have not watched the sequel yet, but we're going to. But Mark, my first question for you is, did you ever have a hot babysitter?
I had a lot of babysitters. I think I probably had a few hot ones, but I was probably too young to realize how hot they were.
Whoa! Hey-oh!
No, we had some nice babysitters, and I think my parents took like a trip out of town for like a couple weeks. Probably like in the early 90s, and I think her name was Amy McHale, came over.
Wow, okay, should I bleep that? Like, I mean, does this woman want to be outed on this podcast?
Probably, yeah. Yeah, she was a good babysitter. I think her friend's name was Angie, and they kind of they watched my brother and my sister and I for a few weeks, and yeah, so I mean, I can relate. We also had some people come stay with us, and we had a babysitter, my dad's friend's kids or something, and the kid was so terrible that the babysitter refused to ever come back and babysit for us.
Wow. Okay. So my babysitter story is that I literally only once in the history of my life had a babysitter who was not a relative, and I remember crying the entire time. It was traumatic. I was like 3 or 4, and every other time I ever was watched was either by my sister or by my grandparents. So, I mean, I don't know what that says. I mean, maybe I'm not great, Bob.
Yeah, it sounds pretty boring. You should get a better story.
Wow. Okay, so I love this movie because the aesthetic, the tone, the cinematography, like they're all perfection. And this is my jam about horror comedies. Oh, you know what other horror comedies need to be mentioned on this level are Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day 2, which I don't think you've seen the sequel yet, but like, that's great. I love horror comedies.
And this one doesn't go as far as like the scary movies, like the parody movies. Like this one is actually its own story and everything. And it was very well done with the comedic angle a lot of the time, but also with the horror angle. So I really appreciated that.
This is the thing I love about this movie. They set up this real lovable character of Cole. He, like, the opening sequence is that he hates needles and he has to get a shot. And, you know, he does it, but he's screaming. And you know what? Guess what? Our 13-year-old is exactly the same way. And Mark, I know that the only time I witnessed you getting a shot, you started laughing hysterically. And the nurse asked me, like, is he going to be okay? Do I need to, like, get a pillow because he's going to pass out?
So, yeah, since then I've given blood a lot more. You know, I've taken not a lot of shots. I've taken a few shots of Jaeger. Just kidding. I've taken, you know, I've gotten a few shots. I've given blood. So I think I've gotten over the needle thing. The most important thing is just to not look. I mean, you just got to not look. It doesn't even hurt. You just gotta do that.
I do not have a fear of needles, but I appreciate people who do. And so, you know, I understand. I also love that the babysitter, quote unquote, understands immediately what her ward is feeling in this moment. And when he is being bullied, she knows when he's lying. She tells him, like, oh, I know you're lying because you're not looking me in the eye. And that comes into play later, which is super cool because guess what? This is something I teach in my classes as a communication teacher is tells. And Mark, you have tells as a human being, and so do I. I'm going to reveal one of your tells to you right now live on Horror Remind. I may have told you this before, but when you're super drunk, you can't make eye contact with me.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So, yeah, cool. And do you have any tell to reveal to me?
No, I just know you're always like, you've been drinking. I'm like, what? No, I haven't. You're like, yeah, I can tell. So, no, I know how. I'm going to stop drinking.
Oh, okay. So, this is Mark's sober date. So, anyway, I love that. Also,
just real quick, I don't think you have any tells, so bravo to you.
I have the most tells, and that you can't tell tells me that you didn't take enough communication courses.
So what is your self-assessment of your tells?
If you're not watching me right now and you can't tell, then bye.
Touché.
The other thing that happens in this exchange when she's telling him about his tell is that she says, like, if someone's chasing you like a bully, you run and then you drop like a bag of rocks or whatever. And when they trip over you, you get up and kick them in the dick. And I freaking love that.
So I felt like the first 20 or so minutes of this movie was just like setting up everything for later. Like every little thing that happened was gonna come into play later.
And Mark, what have I taught you that's called?
The exposition.
Oh, Mark, you're learning. He's growing, you guys. He's learning. I love it. It's true. So listen to me. The other thing they set up in the exposition, speaking of, is that his dad is trying to teach him to drive at the age of 12. And guess what? I think I drove before 12, like because we had a long driveway and we lived in the country. When did you start learning to drive?
I think I used to drive around my neighborhood in my brother's Acura Integra when I was like 13, 14. I thought it was so cool and it was so fun, but I was just a loser.
Wow, name dropping like an actual like Acura Integra? Like, I have not heard that phrase in decades.
Yeah, I don't think they make that car anymore. So, yeah, it was an okay car. Kind of conked out on us at the end, but you know, it did the job. I think my brother drove. No, that was a Saturn. Never mind. Just keep going.
Oh wow. Okay.
Wait, all right. Wait. Or as my mom would say, a Saturn.
Oh, boy. I love, as I've mentioned, the aesthetic, the cinematography of this movie. I love how they do slow-mo for the background in a couple of scenes. And the friends, the main character and his BF, who ends up being his love interest, they're shown in real time. Like, I don't know how they did it, but my hat's off to you, peeps.
Yeah, those are some cool shots. Pretty much earlier in the movie. But yeah, I don't even know how they did that. Like, how do you do that? It's the magic of cinema.
See, this is why we love to see movies in the theater proper, but we haven't gone yet during COVID times. And you know what? We're going to wait until Dr. Fauci says it's safe.
So yeah, I was trying to get Kelly to see, is it called Tenet? Yeah, I was trying to get Kelly to, because it's showing around here, and Kelly refuses. So if anyone wants to go see Tenet with me, I'm available.
Just add him and he probably will oblige, and he'll be like, oh, guess what? I'm going to like do a COVID test. But P.S. he shows up 3 hours later like, I saw Tenet. It was awesome. Which, guess what? I guess it's awesome. Like, I assume it's awesome. But at the same time, at what cost?
I'm going to be super analytical and critical of the movie, just like I am on this podcast. So if you wanted to go see it with me, be ready for a lengthy conversation after.
Oh, okay. Cool. I love that there is so much humor and like one-liners that literally made me laugh out loud. There's this moment when they're talking about an orgy. Mark, do you remember this? And he does this orgy definition, which is like, do you even know what an orgy is? And he's like, yeah, it's when a bunch of sad people get together with a other bunch of sad people and like they try to forget that they're sad for a moment. And the shirtless guy who is like ripped AF is like, actually, that's pretty accurate.
That was a great scene and very accurate. And that was funny. He's like, that was a great answer.
It was good. Like, I appreciated that. And also, Mark, if you remember, you referred to the mom who was cast in this movie as a poor man's Leslie Mann. You were like, is that Judd Apatow's wife? And I'm like, no.
I thought it was Leslie Mann, and then you revealed to me that it wasn't, and then you told me, because she looks super familiar. I don't know what she's in. Maybe you're going to tell me in a second, but yeah, I thought it was her. It wasn't, and then you made fun of me for 10 minutes. So who is it? You don't know?
A major moment in this film is when they play Truth or Dare, and the child is looking onto this group and witnessing it. Mark, you need to tell me, have you ever played Truth or Dare?
Yes, I have played it a few times, yes.
Okay, outcome?
I think we did truth and then nobody ever answered anything.
What were you dared to do?
I can't remember. I can't even say what it was.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Like, that is very telling. Okay, so the character of Sonia, do you remember when Samara Weaving / the babysitter was dared to go around the circle and kiss everyone? She kisses Sonia, and I was like, how do I know her? And so obviously I looked her up, and she is the quiet one from Pitch Perfect. And I freaking love Pitch Perfect, and I did not love Pitch Perfect 2, and I don't know if I've actually watched Pitch Perfect 3, but it's so funny, and she's amazing. So the actress is, super great. But yeah, go Sonia.
Yeah, so I did a little bit of research here. The one I thought was Leslie Mann is named Leslie Bibb. She's from North Dakota. She was born in 1974. And she's been in, the Iron Man 1 and 2. She's been in, Talladega Nights. I think she was, Will Ferrell's wife or something. I mean, she's a pretty big deal. So, I mean, that's definitely why I recognized her.
No, I get it.
So the main kid in the movie, I don't even know his name, but he really reminds me of Cole. Reminds me of my son Campbell a lot. He kind of looks like him, kind of acts like him, and so yeah, that kind of resonated with me.
No, I love Cole, and yes, I get it. And he's definitely not a bully, and he loves learning about things. He is intelligent. He's empathetic. He's all the qualities that anyone should aspire to be. So he's the perfect hero for this film.
Yeah, and then one of the scenes I thought was pretty funny was the babysitter tries to get Cole to take a shot. She thinks it's gonna be really cool, but she actually puts some roofie in it or whatever that's supposed to make him pass out so they can steal his blood for the ritual thing. But he dumps the shot out when she leaves the room. So he's awake during their whole thing. So I thought that was a nice little twist.
When he dumped that, it was literally Mike's hard lemonade into a planter. I was like, oh my God, this is the moment that George Clooney experienced with Danny DeVito in his famous, limoncello incident.
It also reminded me of my mom. She was at our house once. We were all taking shots of sake, and my mom was sipping a shot of sake. We were watching some basketball game, and every time, yeah, super. It's 10% alcohol. My mom.
It's less than that.
Is it?
It's less than 10% alcohol. I promise you.
So my mom literally sipped a shot of sake for an hour and a half. So that was pretty disappointing.
Oh no offense.
I did appreciate the Mad Men reference. Cole's parents were watching Mad Men, and they're oh, you can't handle it, and then he went up into his room and watched Mad Men literally all night. So great show. I strongly recommend it.
I love Mad Men. Don Draper is considered one of the greatest anti-heroes of all time, and I think I agree. I mean, obviously we do, because his face adorns our wall in our living room.
Yeah, he's literally kind of looking at me right now, disapproving me. So, sorry, Don. Yeah, so, these people are doing this ritual, and the kid ends up calling the cops. The cops show up, and then one of the guys ends up throwing a poker, from a fire, through his head. I thought that was a cool scene.
Oh my gosh, it's so extreme, and the entire sequence with the cops is super funny, but also super woke, because the black guy is Black Lives Matter, like, don't kill me. And then he's like, wait, you're Hispanic? And he starts speaking Spanish to him. And it is just beyond. And also, he ends up getting blood on him from multiple people. And he's like, oh, 3 out of 4 people get STDs. And I got, like, at least 2 people's blood on me. So I know I have AIDS.
That was a super funny scene, yeah. And this movie is from, like, 2017. So, yeah, they were already aware of all these issues back then. So it's kind of sad that it's, like, still, like, such a huge deal. So.
I know, Mark. And we were aware of it then, too. But, you know, it keeps happening. So, yeah, be woke, people.
So there were a few scenes in this movie where they talked about, like, egging houses. And his friends, not even his friends, like, these kids from his class were egging his house. And I'm sad to admit that we used to partake in egging of houses. So if anyone out there is listening and your house has been egged, and I may or may have not done it, I'm sorry.
Mark, tell us the truth right now. Like, what happened?
We would literally just go get eggs and just throw them at houses because we were bored because we didn't have phones. That was the problem. We didn't even have phones.
You've heard it here live. Like, people used to egg houses because they were bored because they didn't have phones.
I want to see a graph of, like, having phones and, like, houses being egged. Because I bet in the last, like, 10 years, it's gone way down.
I'm going to maybe research this because I research scientific things. And, yeah, I'm going to figure it out, Mark. And, wow, I'm going to expose you.
I feel like kids used to be so bored that we just, like, went out and just, like, did anything just to, like, feel something. And now I feel like it doesn't happen anymore.
Wow. Okay, so listen to me. Okay. At some point, do you remember when Cole fell out of the window and he got the wind knocked out of him? Has that ever happened to you?
I've gotten the wind knocked out of me, not from falling out of a window, but, like, from, like, playing sports and stuff.
Wait, tell me everything.
I think in maybe, like, playing football, like, on the playground, or playing soccer in, like, a soccer game. You know, if somebody hits your stomach wrong, you just lose all your wind. It's not good.
Describe how it feels for those of us who have not gotten the wind knocked out of us.
It just feels like you can't breathe, you can't catch your breath, and you just feel like you need to take a second to just, you know, recover.
Oh, wow. No, that's extraordinary, and thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So all the quote-unquote, like, bad people, their deaths were, like, I felt like they were, like, pretty lucky, and, like, they were funny, too. Like, the first guy, he tried to chase him up the stairs, and I think he tripped on the car, which was set up in the beginning of the movie. And he ended up falling all the way down, and, like, some trophy like, went through his neck. The shirtless dude, like, went up into his treehouse with him, and he ended up getting, like, somehow getting hung on the rope or something. So, I mean, pretty convenient, like, funny, accidental deaths for all the bad people. And that girl was underneath the house and got hit by the firework as he was, like, screwing back the thing in for the crawl space. That was a good one. What was the other ones?
So, Mark, I may or may not be giving you a spoiler right now, but I think because of their satanic rituals, they might not actually be dead. But I don't know this because I have definitely 100% not watched the sequel, but they might be alive. That
was one thing they never really got into, was, like, why they were doing it. and like who they were. So I guess I would like to know more about that.
Hence the sequel, and people are loving the sequel. And guess what? We're going to 100% watch it and also record on it. So, Mark, do you have anything else you want to say about this movie before we rank it?
I'm going to say I like this, like the suburban feel. It kind of like hit home for me, and like kind of like the Burbs. Pretty much the whole movie just kind of took place either at the school or in their neighborhood. So I like that. So if you could, she kind of promised at the end that you could become immortal with her and like just like go along with her on her journey. Would you do that, Kelly, or would you prefer to burn her book?
I would 100% become immortal because I would try to right all the wrongs of humanity. Mark, what's your choice?
I didn't even think of that, like actually being a good person, but you know, you kind of associate immortality with being like a terrible person and like killing people and doing bad stuff. So I guess I'll go with what you said. Take to immortality and do good for the world. So that's my answer.
How convenient. All right, let's rank this movie on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being you hated it. 10 being it's a perfect movie. What's your scale?
I don't even know. What do you think?
The scale for The Babysitter is Mike's Hard Lemonade. How many Mike's Hard Lemonade do you give The Babysitter?
I'm going to give it like 8 shots of Mike's Hard Lemonade. And then I'm going to actually dump one of them into my plant. So it's going to end up being a 7. But then I think it's actually an 8. But anyway, no, I really enjoyed the movie. Another one, I know I always say this, didn't even know it existed. So I had no preconceived notion of anything that was going to happen. I really enjoyed the tone. I thought it was, funny, suspenseful, everything, and I strongly recommend it. I'm going to try not to talk too long so Kelly can go.
I'm giving it a 9 Mike's Hard Lemonade shots with roofies in it, and like hopefully not.
So, like, how much is a shot of Mike's Hard Lemonade? Is that like you could put like 6 shots in from one can?
No, we're not talking about that. And guess what? Mike's Hard Lemonade does not come in cans. This is how lame you are. It comes in bottles.
Sorry, I'm so lame. I don't drink Mike's Hard Lemonade.
No, so I think it was great. And like the reason I didn't watch it initially, as I've said, is because I feared that it was not feminist enough, and I know that makes me lame, and like I'm sorry if I'm too feminist, but it was funny, it was scary, it was great, and the cinematography blew me away. So watch it, people. We are going to watch the sequel, and I cannot wait because I've heard amazing things.
Well, hello. It's time for Meg's Spooky Book Corner once again. And today we are talking about the book, The Devil's Dreamland, Poetry Inspired by H.H. Holmes by Sarah Tantlinger. Now, I've been wanting to read something by Sarah for a while now, and I am immersed in research for our 4th Science of title. It's the science of serial killers, and we're sort of taking a as we have with in all the other books, we're taking sort of a fiction versus nonfiction route in describing and understanding serial killers and sort of how we as consumers see them. So when I was flipping through Twitter and Sarah reminded me that she had this book, I realized it was a great gateway into my chapter on H.H. Holmes. So if you don't know much about H.H. Holmes, there isn't as much out there as I would like there to be. Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese got the rights, and they originally, the rights of the book Devil in the White City, which was a very popular book about H.H. Holmes that I definitely recommend. I've probably talked about before on the podcast. And they were going to develop it into a movie, but then now they've decided to make it into a television show, I believe for Netflix or Hulu, or possibly Prime. I don't know. But that hasn't come out yet, of course. Everything's, been postponed lately. So I very much look forward to watching that. And I think that will be sort of H.H. Holmes' sort of way of popularizing himself in the media. Because right now, aside from the popular book that I mentioned, there are documentaries about him. There are certainly other books, but he isn't quite in the forefront of the minds of everyone, and he deserves to be because he's very fascinating. There's also a book by Harold Schechter on him too, and he's one of my favorite true crime writers, and I haven't read that one, but I plan to. So what sort of drew me to this book is that it's poetry inspired by H.H. Holmes, and I like this idea of, again, this sort of walking the fine line of fiction and nonfiction. And I have to admit that I'm not a big poetry reader. I have two favorite poets, and they're Edgar Allan Poe and Emily Dickinson, and they are the only poets that I've read, in my free time for my own pleasure. Otherwise, I've read a lot of poetry because I was a literature student, and I liked some of it. In fact, I loved some of it. But again, it's not something I necessarily do in my free time. I tend to read just more your typical short stories, novels, prose. So it was actually quite a treat to read some poetry. And I think that something that I love about the art of poetry is just the frankness and the use of beautiful language. And really, what I love about short stories is the ability to sort of winnow things down to short and sweet. And I mean, a good poet can do that even better. And Sarah certainly is a good poet, and she has so many cool poems in this book. It is really, and she says in the intro, this is not a history lesson. This is sort of an amalgamation of the man himself and the history, but also sort of who he's become in her mind, which I thought was a really cool way to explain it. There are so many things to read in here and learn. And again, I think if you come with like a little bit of a foundation of knowing who H.H. Holmes is, so, he's this man who is a doctor. He has every opportunity in the world. He's considered the first American serial killer. And I think a big reason for that, it's not because he's the first, man to go around killing people in America, but a big piece of it is because he is everything that we sort of put upon what fascinates us about serial killers. He's charming, he's somewhat handsome, mothers want their daughters to marry him, he is not poor, he has, if he wanted to, he could have lived a very nice and comfortable life, maybe even more than comfortable, because he certainly was ambitious. But instead, he at his heart is a sociopath, and he has excuses for why he ends up doing what he does, but he ends up building what's called the Murder Castle in Chicago, and it's a place devoted to murder. And he gets to come up in a time where it's very easy to make people disappear. And so it's just sort of this very unfortunate series of coincidences and events that sort of make him into a monster. And, he ends up killing children. He is someone who people believe. You know, he has that doctor in front of his name, and he uses his charm, as I said, and I think that it's easy to sort of put him in the pantheon with, you know, the Ted Bundys, the men who are so incredibly two-faced that it's sort of hard to believe that they're part of our species. So this book, I very much recommend it. It has such beautiful poetry in it about such ghastly things, and of course that's what I love. But it also, it moves in a very how do you say, in a very way of, well, again, it's not historical exactly, but it definitely starts with his beginnings and him moving to Chicago. You know, it ends with the end of him. And so it is sort of moving with his life and what happens in his life. I appreciated there are several poems about comparing him to Jack the Ripper, because Jack the Ripper was haunting England at the same time. And so I really enjoyed those poems. And I enjoyed the poems also from other perspectives. There's definitely climbing into his head, but there's also climbing into the heads of his multiple wives and his victims, and so I very, very much recommend it. It is from Strange House Books, and I really think you would enjoy it if you enjoy true crime as much as I do, as well as just well-written literature as well as I do. And again, it's by Sarah Tantlinger, and she has other works out there, and you should check her out as well. So as we wait patiently for the H.H. Holmes television show, pick this up, as well as Devil in the White City. And next year, when you pick up the Science of Serial Killers, there is an interview with Sarah in there, and I ask her all sorts of questions and pick her brain about H.H. Holmes and what drew her to write a whole book about him. And so I definitely encourage you to pick that up next year too. All right, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the horror book section. Bye, Rewinders.
Until next time, we'll see you in the horror section.
Bye.